Hi, perhaps you recognize me. It's your favorite president.
We will decide who comes to this country and the circumstances in which they come.
G'day everyone, welcome back to another episode of Commanding the Narrative. Okay, on to today's guest. Now, the big thing that's happened in the world recently is this Donald Trump versus Vladimir Zelensky showdown in the White House. Now, the guest that we're bringing on has spent time in the US Congress and also in the Senate and has been involved with presidents and notable people in the US. Let's bring him on to get his judgment of it all because he's got a lot to say. Dr. Christopher Reynolds, welcome back to Commanding the Narrative.
Yes, good afternoon, Steve. Nice to be with you.
Yes, it's nice to have you back. Why don't we start off by, just in your own words, tell us why you're uniquely placed here in Australia to speak on this issue. Like, you've been in these places in America and you've dealt with a lot of politicians over there. Just give us a little bit of that background first.
Yes, well, I'm the only Australian to hold positions within the US Congress and Senate. So I was senior professional staff with the House Committee on Children, Youth and Families, and then went on to be senior professional staff with the Senate Judiciary Committee. Now, the Judiciary Committee is the highest of the Senate committees, and the senior professional staff position is underneath the Chief of Staff for that committee. So there were 93 lawyers worked for that committee. And Chris, I've got a PhD in law, but I didn't pass any of the state bar exams to actually be qualified to practice law in any of the states. Nevertheless, at the time I was there, I worked with Biden, I worked with Kennedy, and I wrote Mitch McConnell's first legislation. I was there as an Australian and kept my Australian citizenship based on the quality of my work. I wasn't there because I was related to anyone or I had money, but I kept moving up and getting senior positions because of the quality of the work. And eventually, in working on several projects with the White House, I got a commendation from President Reagan himself, commending me, and it says, for your excellent work in the Congress. Now, as you see on TV all the time, the Congress and even the Senate and the House are in conflict, and they're certainly in conflict until recently with Donald Trump with the president. So you see it's set up that way. So for the president to actually write and give a congressional staffer, a Senate staffer, a letter that says, thank you for your excellent work, it was indeed a commendation. At one stage, there was a senior fellow in the White House that was considering employing me to actually come and work in the White House. And today I look at the people being interviewed to come and work in the White House as senior positions, and you can just imagine how the world would spin if one of those people was actually an Australian being to come and work in the White House. So, yes, I was right in there with the White House, and the White House, you don't know, it has a monthly or bi-monthly special meeting, a private meeting for people that would support their programs. And it was only about 50 people that were invited into that room that you see when they do press meetings with the blue curtains and a couple of flags. Well, they use that meeting for private briefings, and I was a regular at those private White House briefings. So I was well and truly involved in the White House. I know the Heritage Foundation and the people there, and I understand their thinking, which again is having a lot of influence on President Trump's thinking at the moment. So the thing of why all this is important is because when you come to deal with or talk to the Americans, yes, we all talk English, but there is a different logic. And it's understanding the priorities and what they're actually saying, as Zelensky couldn't, that makes me quite unique, that I could talk very successfully with leaders of the United States. So when it comes to this latest interview, I could not help but see that Zelensky and many others in the next 48 hours just did not have a clue of what was going on in America's mind or why Donald Trump was saying what he was.
Yeah, so you've written books about a lot of this stuff. This one here, Global Logic, The Challenge of Globalism for Southeast Asian Business. This is up on Amazon if anyone wants to check it out. but you're going to be referring to this book during this interview. But before, to go back to that scene in the White House, there's a lot of people out there making commentary of it. There's a lot of people in the Australian media making commentary of it. But for you, what do you see when you're watching Zelensky and Trump and JD Vance and all the media around? I guess peering between the forest. What can you see in it all?
Yeah, that's the place to start, because I mean, as I watched the interviews, the interviews I got, I'm sure there must be a longer version, started off with Trump saying, what does he say to start with? But I'm not on anybody's side, I think is the first words that I got on the interview. And as he's, I'm on, America's side, I'm on the side of the world. Fascinating statement. I'm on the side of the world. Like, and what side are you on? Was what, what's being implied. And so as you watch the dialogue between these two, I would say most people watching it were absolutely confused as to what the argument was about and why they were arguing. And when Vance stepped in, what was he saying, and to watch it, I had to watch it several times myself, and I could feel the clash that was going on. But the only way to understand why they were clashing is to basically listen to one of the speakers and then the others. And so Zelensky is of a particular paradigm, which is not the paradigm that Trump is now thinking out of. So let me just explain that. When you listen to what Zelensky is saying, he is very much European. And I had to go and look up his background, because, I mean, I thought, now I've heard this sort of way of approaching things before, because I lived in the Middle East for 10 years. And many of the people that are Arabic do speak in that way. They're very hard. They know what they want to say. You've got to have their point of view. You should see them arguing with the police on the side of the road, And then I thought, wait a minute, there's more to it. He's actually a Russian Jew. I don't know if that influenced him, but he certainly got that, again, Russian approach. And we'd see it as hard line. There wasn't any, I hear what you're saying. There was none of that, or I appreciate your comment. There was no sort of discussion. He just had his point of view. Very European when you listen to it. And I want to talk about what that European view is and why it's now very quickly moving to the dustbin of history. On the other side of it, when you just listen to what Donald was saying, or if I may call him Donald, what Donald was saying, you listen to the key words. I'm on nobody's side. This is an unwinnable war. No, I'm not putting US troops into an unwinnable war. And no, you cannot join NATO, which was the very thing that the Ukraine wanted right from the beginning, that upset the Russians. The Ukrainian and Zelensky keep saying, oh, the Russians invaded us on such and such a date. And you think, why? Why did they come into Ukraine? And I couldn't help, as I watched it, I felt like I was I've got 4 sons, and I felt like I was thrown back into my earlier life, where I was sitting beside the desk, and number 2 son would come in and say, number 1 son just stole my marbles, and I want you to come and sort it out, And here I was, I'd put down my pen and my glasses, and I'd go around and I'd stand in front of David and say, did you take his marbles? Yes. And Andrew would be standing there saying, and I'm going to sort him out, as in his own words, and you're going to stand behind me and back up everything I say. And you'd say, wait a second, how did you get the marbles? Some of them are your marbles, So this
just to give it context, because I don't know how many people have actually watched the whole 40 minutes of it.
Oh yeah.
I went back and did, well, first I watched the first 7 minutes. I actually watched it live. I was watching something else, and then it popped up at 4:30 in the morning or whatever it was. But then I went back a couple of days later and watched the whole thing. And the media are criticizing Trump for going so hard on Zelensky. But if you watch that whole interview, Trump was controlled throughout, and the points that you just raised are spot on. Trump's message was, we need to stop the killing. We need to make a deal. Zelensky's message kept going back to, Putin's a killer. He cannot be trusted, and Ukrainians will fight forever if they have to. Now, it wasn't until J.D. Vance piped up that Zelensky really got into it. I've got the clip. So for everyone who maybe hasn't watched it, I don't know if you've been living under a rock and you haven't seen it, but for everyone, just to get a little bit of context before we move on, I'll just play this clip.
After that, he broken this ceasefire. He killed our people, and he didn't exchange prisoners. We signed the exchange of prisoners, but he didn't do it. What kind of diplomacy, JD, you are speaking about? What do you mean?
I'm talking about the kind of diplomacy that's going to end the destruction of your country.
Yes, but if you
Mr. President, with respect, I think it's disrespectful for you to come into the Oval Office and try to litigate this in front of the American media. Right now, you guys are going around and forcing conscripts to the front lines because you have manpower problems. You should be thanking the president for trying to bring an end to this conflict.
Have you ever been to Ukraine that you?
So that was that's what really set it off.
Yeah,
it speaks to everything that you've been saying.
Yeah. So if you listen to Zelensky, he's got his arms folded. You know, the body language is, "You're not listening to me. I want peace on my terms. Peace means we beat Russia." And Trump says, "But you sound like you're talking about you're going to run us to the Third World War." Zelensky does not come back at that because, yes, that's the European mindset. So Europe had been fighting up, as you know, I've written this book on Australian history called What a Capital Idea. And the second chapter, I think, gets into the wars across Europe. And it takes forever to work out who was fighting with who when. And they virtually had it said the First World War there in the end of the 1800s. And everybody was involved. Russia was with Austria, and then they were somebody else, and then they're fighting. And it was just, from our perspective, just a mess in terms of who was fighting who. So we don't really understand the European theatre, but they do. That history is with them. And you can hear the resentment. And even Trump picks up on the fact that, he says, I can hear that you really hate the Russians. And then he says, well, they probably hate you too. As he looks over, a lot of ill feeling for you too. But that's not the way he wants to move forward, which is business. So Zelensky, for him, when the meeting with Trump was over, he ran off to England. And within 48 hours, he secured more money to continue the war for his version of getting peace, which is to smash the other guy, and there is no getting him ever to sit down and basically negotiate a better way forward. It's just in their mindset. So we got to, for what is actually happening, we need to put that on the side for a minute to understand why he represents a failing and archaic Europe, because that is in fact what you were seeing. In the arrogance of the man who sat there with his arms folded and wanted to lecture the US president for the Americans was unbelievable. Let me just jump ahead a bit. There was today or yesterday in the United States, one of the big chip companies out of Taiwan was there. The fellow Wei, I think his name, was in the White House again, just like Zelensky had been invited. And so he did what he was supposed to do. Donald got up and said, we're all very happy to be here, and this is Mr. Wei from Taiwan, and he's investing $100 billion today into the United States. $100 billion. That means he's got now $167 billion flowing in the United States. Now, the United States has seen $1.7 trillion in increased investments into America in just 4 weeks. So the business world knows what's happening. When Mr. Wei stood up, he said, thank you, Mr. President. It's lovely to be here, and it's also great. And this is what we're doing, and we really look forward to the future. And again, thank you, Mr. President. Now, that's what was expected of Zelensky. But he could not get out of his zone. He could not take off that jumper. He didn't even go to the White House in a suit. I had to go and look up who the PR company is behind him that's doing this. And there's actually 3 American companies that have been moving him around the world over these past few years, making money. But none of them had the sense to say, today, this is what you say. You're signing a document and you're smiling and saying thank you. And of course, we've all now seen that.
I think Zelensky made that mistake. You know, if you go back the last 3 years, he's used to going into these meetings or going into these events, giving his little sob story, and everyone cheering him and giving him a standing ovation and saying, "Carry on, we're gonna throw money at you, and you just keep fighting." He got a very, very different response from Trump. And I'll just play this clip because this goes to show Trump was saying, no, and you can't keep fighting. You're playing with World War III.
Yeah. So let me just start to break this down.
You're not in a good position. You don't have the cards right now. With us, you start having cards. Right now, you don't. You're playing cards. You're playing cards. You're gambling with the lives of millions of people. You're gambling with World War III.
So that's the clip. What's your take on that?
So you can see the clash of what's going on, but you've got to wait. We can, if we stop and look at where Trump is and what's happening around him, you start to see the signs of how his mindset, his paradigm is different. So what Zelensky has done has brought the clash of the paradigms. Now, this is going to take a bit, but you just have to stay with me for a minute.
Yep.
There's been a clash on several. We're seeing a change of guard, as it were, on several fronts. Historically, we went through an agricultural era. You know, people had money and farms, and you had dukes and lords because they had farms and power, etc. And we moved to an industrial era where it was suddenly the people with factories that had money, and England had to invent a lower house, the House of Commons, in order to allow people of money to have a voice in the parliament. But we have now moved beyond the industrial age into the technological age. Now, when I wrote that book on global logic, I called it the ICT revolution, information communication technology. It's not just IT. It's the speed of communication that's so incredibly important. It's the amount of communication. When I wrote the book, if I remember the figures, they're rough. Europe turned over about $7 trillion a year as an economy. America turned over $9 trillion a year as an economy. Yet the London Interlink Bank turned over $1 trillion in trade every night.
Wow.
Every night. Now, the numbers have gone up. But it's also not just the speed of money, but it's the speed of communication. You know, money is just a figure, you know, in a dot and a dash that's moving across the world. Politicians come out and say, you know, I'm very glad that this other politician was with me, and we get to shake hands in front of the cameras. But there's very little politicians can do today to affect what is really happening that's not global. Or it is global, I should say. It's not national. The communication and the finance systems are now global. So we're moving into a new era. And when I wrote that Global Logic 20 years ago, as a social prophet, telling the world where it was going, I was predicting that we would have this clash, as you would, between those that are invested in the industrial era and those that are now moving the ITC world in front, which is again the point of Taiwan bringing $167 billion into America this week, and the 107 trillion that's moving in. So we're moving into a different world. It's almost like we're in space time, and you know, it's sort of something out of a movie, and we are. And that then becomes the problem. So what does Donald want to do? Here comes the Donald paradigm. He's not just a mechanist that wants to see conflict, that has to have an enemy. He's now moving away from the functionalist model, which is where we get all our bureaucracy. We've got to have lots of regulations. And they're picking up on how Herbert Mead wrote in the 1930s, and that's more of an interaction model. It's interactional. It's happening now. There'll be another interaction tomorrow. Change is part of just the system in which we live. We've got to be there as change agents. So he's affecting the money system with Bitcoin. He's affecting the computer system with the chips. He's out to do so much more about how the world. So he's also bringing down all the cyber warfare guards against Russia. What do we need them for, Putin? You know, if you bring down yours and I bring down mine, we can get on with doing, what's the key word here? Business. Business is about money. Zelensky wants money to buy armaments for a fight. Trump and the New World Order only sees money as a means for the interactions to go on. And so he says, we'll put money into your country and we'll buy those special minerals, rare earths. What do they use for? The computer business. So he's only interested in the future. We'll put money in your country, we'll do a business agreement, and with that you can have your security, and then we'll go talk to the Russians. But I'm not on anybody's side, he's trying to say to Zelensky. So here is the clash of what's taking place across the world. So we have to see, understand that it's a clash of not just, as it were, new world order, it's just a new world in terms of technology versus an industrial world order of the Europeans and NATO.
You mentioned before the Middle Eastern element to Zelensky, and as you're speaking now, I'm reminded of the conflict in Gaza as well between the Palestinians and Israel. Is it a similar thing where it's like the conflict just wants to go on forever, and Trump's looking at it going, mate, look at your coastline. You have tremendous opportunity here. You can make resorts along this coastline. It's a beautiful place. You can build it up. I mean, he kind of used the same argument with North Korea as well, and said you can open your country up to the world and do business. That's his mindset. But these other leaders are just focused purely on tribal conflicts. Yeah,
you're right. So there you've got another one. The Palestinians, who were the Philistines, is the same word, would you chase it back, have been fighting the Israelis for how many centuries? Is it 4,000 years or something? You know, this war's been going on, and they carry that history with them. You know, you've done this to our people. It's our land. Well, it actually isn't. It was all sold by private companies and owned by Israelis who made purchase of the land. Oh, no, it's still our land, you know, and we're going to have this fight. What is intriguing, fascinating really, is how Russia is prepared to walk away from those hard lines. We've always hated you and we're always going to continue fighting with you. When you saw the interview with Putin, or Putin had an interview, it was Tucker Carlson. It must be within the last year. It was amazing to see Putin speak about things. And again, he was sort of saying, well, this is a nice topic, but where I want to take Russia is into the future. You know, there's other big things happening with technology and communication, and that's where we're going. And he would stop and sort of, shift in his seat and sort of say, oh, well, the war is happening. Well, and there's reasons for it, but it's not where my mind is. The other clue to this is, if Donald was on the phone to Putin 2 or 3 weeks ago, and they were on the phone for 1 hour and 20 minutes, but only spent 10 minutes talking about the Ukraine, what did they talk about? What did they talk about? Because they're talking about business. They're talking about the future. Putin is a billionaire. You know, he's used to money in business, and he's thinking not just in terms of my current asset, but his current asset, even in Russia, is where the future's going.
All good. In fairness to Zelensky, he's making the argument that Putin can't be trusted, and he'll probably, if there is a ceasefire, Putin will break it. Do you think there's any credence to that?
Well, there probably is. I mean, but again, we'd have to sort of sit there with the two boys and say, well, why have you got the big blue marble when he wants the big blue marble? And, you can see this. And does it do us any good? I mean, what are you going to do? Slap him on the hand, or you want to get the blue marble back? And why did he break it? So you can see how you could get involved in this. But what are you really hearing for is this spite. So they're not coming anywhere near being able to shake hands and get on with something fantastic into the future when you're talking spite and hatred and he owes me, and I want this and I want that. So you can see why Donald and the others are scratching their heads saying, we got other things going on here rather than your war. And if we walk away, guess what? You don't have a war.
Talk to me about JD Vance. What was your interpretation or impression of him? Because he came across as very impressive to me when I was watching it. How did you feel about it?
I tell you what I am impressed with is that when I saw him speak, and I've now seen that the fellow who is the Secretary for Defence speak, and also Rubio is the Foreign Affairs, it's like I'm hearing the same person speak. And I think is there just one guy writing all of their speeches. So I cannot believe, I don't know if I've ever heard a team so on the same page. And it's so confidently on the same page. You know, Vance wasn't looking at Trump to sort of get approval for what he was saying. He was saying what Trump was already thinking, and the other two men in the room were also thinking, you know, you're in the White House. I mean, you're only lucky to be here because we invited you. So I'm hearing the same sort of thing. So Vance, of course, is also published. Is a very intelligent person, but wherever they're being, you know, all sitting and having lunch and talking to each other, there is, it seems to me, no disagreement. It is absolutely amazing to hear that they all understand how they're going to make America great again. Now, that needs to be broken down. I think too, when they're talking about making America great again or restoring the American dream, they're not talking about going backwards. They're not talking about the dream of the 1960s of lovely suburban homes and new fridges and new televisions and a great big car in the driveway. That's not what they're talking about. They're talking about strength and leadership and the future. They're talking about business and economic opportunities. Now, again, what do you need if you're going to succeed? You need energy. We need to get the fuel prices down. Taxation. How do we get taxation anyway? Can we get rid of the IRS? Why don't we have, instead of the Internal Revenue Service, the External Revenue Service? Can we actually run this company on tariffs? These are amazing thoughts. So if you allow me, as I was saying, there's several ways to understand the shifting in the plates here. And I mentioned that we'd moved through the agricultural, the industrial to the technological age, but there's another major shift too. In 1776, a guy called Adam Smith put out a book called The Wealth of Nations, and he is basically the father of economics. He comes up with the term and he talks about supply and demand, and we get the demand curves and supply curves. Now that has really dominated. It is the way we think of economics even today. In terms of supply, you know, supply chains and costs and storage, etc. Now, then what happens is that model gets threatened. It's all free enterprise. It gets threatened with the Great Depression with Maynard Keynes, an English economist, who's actually talking about the welfare net. Now, Australia is still in Maynard Keynes functional regulation thinking. We have 1/3 of the nation works to support the other 2/3 of the nation, which is an incredibly insane economic proposition. But also between them was a guy called Karl Marx. Now, Karl Marx was basically writing about the poverty. You'd think he was writing about the poverty of nations in France and across Europe. But no, he is the third of the great three economists, because he was talking about it is labour that gives value. It's labour that gives anything value. And so the whole way we understand economics is based upon the human effort to even give diamonds their value. But it's changing. Russia's walked away from communism. China this week is saying it's the private sector that's actually running China. So China's moving away from communism. But we're quite happy in Australia to still be very socialist in the way we run our social welfare programs. And we're not even anywhere near the changes that are going on. So, but it's no longer labour that gives value. It's intelligence. Where we used to talk about the haves and the have-nots, It's now becoming a world of who knows and the have-nots, the knows and the know-nots. That's not donuts. But you got to see. So where is the value on someone coming in to fix my computer? He spends half an hour, but what he does is worth. He says, "Well, that half an hour is going to cost you $20,000 because he just said it was." And he's giving me the price of the value. So you can see even with that, and this then relates over to the Bitcoin business. What is value? So Europe is in a lot of trouble. And there's our next topic. Why is Europe in a lot of trouble?
Well, we'll go into it. Like, I mean, it is a stark contrast, and maybe before we get to Europe, I do want to come back to Europe, but let's focus on Australia, because I've got an article up on commandingthenarrative.com which talks about, why isn't Peter Dutton getting on the Trump train? You would think that they would just follow Trump. He's trailblazing, but it's not happening. And Dutton's the furthest thing away from Trump than we can imagine. And Albanese's worse. And I've got this clip of this is Jackie Lambie talking about the Zelensky thing. I'll just play this quickly because it just goes to show that our media, our politicians, the whole establishment are not seeing what's happening. They're not seeing this shift, this paradigm shift that you're talking about, and they're still backing old Europe.
Ability coming out of that man is absolutely blind. So the only thing Zelensky did wrong, he should have just not interrupted, and he should have just made him make an absolute complete dick of himself, Trump. Because if he hadn't have interrupted him, just let him keep going and going and going, I think you would have seen the full nature of this man. And he is a problem. He is a real problem.
So what that says to me is that here in Australia, we still don't understand Donald Trump or what he's trying to do.
No. It's what you saw is an uneducated opinion. Doesn't understand what Trump is doing, where he is going. Why is there $1.7 trillion coming into his country in 4 weeks? I mean, how much have we had coming into Australia? We sort of continue to watch our exchange rate, like 62 cents in the dollar. I mean, nobody wants our currency. Even to do trade with us, except if, they're buying our dirt, is it? So, yes, Australia, What happened with Australia? We had our leaders step out, and they're fascinating. I mean, here is the Socialist Labour Party, who has been tied to Russia and used to think going to Moscow was the Mecca of their political, religious cult, going to Russia and going to Moscow. So it was unbelievable that a Labour politician would dare say, "Oh, we're going to stand with Zelensky." Why? Why aren't you with Russia to start with? And here's something that's also going on. This is important to Australia. What happens if America is walking away from Europe, making friends with Russia? They're going to do business. They're looking to the future. Where is the bigger game in politics of America talking to Russia? It's breaking the link with China. What are we concerned about in this zone? It's China. Where is any future conflict? I don't want to use the word conflict, competition in the world with America. It's with China and Southeast Asia. We are only able to survive as a country with no defense because of the 7th Fleet. I think it's the 7th Fleet off the coast that's in the China Sea. They got more ships up there than we do in the one fleet, and certainly more people. I think there's, 17,000 or something people, or 7,000. There's more people up there in the 7th Fleet than we've got in the Army. So if we don't have the Americans up there, we have absolutely no defense. But America is not going to let China run across Southeast Asia Pacific. And so breaking that link with China is to our strategic advantage. But our politicians here don't see where America's focus is. They're just caught up in the silliness, and that's all you can say, although it's a tragic silliness because of so many people, as Trump is pointing out, are dying. I was really pleased to hear Trump just confront Zelensky, and he's confronting Europe. And he says, if you keep this up, you're talking about World War III. And as I said, Zelensky didn't say, oh, no, I don't think it's that serious. He just stood there like, so what? That's where we're going, isn't it? That's what peace might require. You can hear the European arrogance that just cannot step out of that paradigm of conflict. And Trump and the others are just sitting back and rolling their eyes like you're nowhere near the big picture. In Australia, as you're pointing out, siding with Europe, why? Oh, well, we sent them money. We don't understand what Donald's doing. So you can so it's completely confusing as to why Albanese is not supporting the communist Russia. When it comes to Peter Dutton, I was fascinated to see when Donald was making all these wonderful statements and doing all these wonderful things just 2 weeks ago. Albanese's team quickly said, "Oh, we're going to paint Peter Dutton as the Australian Donald Trump." And Peter Dutton laughed it off and said, "Well, no, I'm actually more like John Howard." And you've got to stop and think about that. I'm what do you see? A career politician. I'm in the system. I am a systems man. Yes, I will do a number of things that suit the conservative perspective on things, but I'm always going to be watching the polls. So you don't hear a leader. And what the world is seeing in Donald, and just running in all sorts of directions or some are blowing whistles, is that he is walked onto the stage as an international leader. And our people here are just not even able to comprehend, as you see, as Americans do, that they need to get behind the leader.
You know, at the end of that press conference, Trump said, "Oh, well, this is great television," and people seem fascinated with this whole exchange. But I think it's more than just great television. I think there's a fascination, because it did expose this contrast that you're talking about between where Trump's coming from and where Zelensky was, but also where Zelensky is, but where Australia is, where Europe is, where those parts of the world, where their thinking is compared to the ideas that Trump and his team have. Straight after that, Zelensky went to the UK and met with Keir Starmer, and I'll play the clip now. You can see that with their embrace, they're almost trying to send the message to Trump of, you're wrong, we're going to carry on and we're going to keep fighting. So just have a look at this clip.
Gates of Downing Street and straight into a friendly embrace with the Prime Minister. A hug, a handshake. The contrast couldn't be more stark. The message couldn't be clearer.
What's your message to the US President?
So much to talk about. So much to figure out. So much to do.
Can a deal be salvaged, President Zelensky?
As you heard from the cheers in the street outside, you have full backing across the United Kingdom.
So he said it there. He's trying to make the point. Listen to the cheers. You've got support here. You've got full backing. We're going to carry on as normal. And if it leads to World War III, it leads to World War III.
Yeah. So stop and look at that. I mean, he is a Labor man with communist leanings. Again, why would you be anti-Russia? But he's so caught up in the European mindset. Remember that they've got to have conflict. The mechanists have to have a bad guy for them to be the good guy. And there's part of this NATO thing. Why did NATO form? Because the Americans got all this rabble called Europe together and gave them some sort of defense purpose and pulled them together. They then pulled together the European Union, which has just led to this incredible bureaucratic, the overlords that have run the laws across over the entire place, the economics. But America's now looking at it and saying, we don't like to be involved in foreign wars to start with. We're not getting the respect that we should for all the money that we're spending, and you're not even equaling it. If you've been so successful, isn't it time you paid for your own war? But they also look across Europe with its leanings to liberalism. And someone was saying just yesterday, one of the secretaries of state was saying, we feel that Europe is walking away from its democratic values. And then she listed out a number of things that they're doing that America doesn't see as democratic, such as threatening free speech. And I'm not able to tell you or quote what she was saying, but it's still interesting that America is saying Europe is not what it was when we walked in to defend it. And Europe wanting to continue to push east against Russia is just not affordable. What for? How far do you think you're going? And especially if you haven't learned a lesson in the Ukraine, that if you push Russia, they will. If you push them, they will, and you've been told, resort to nuclear weapons. So there doesn't seem to be a lot of sense in why the Europeans all want to stand and hug each other at this point, when America is just saying, you keep that up and we're going to walk away from you. And it is predictable that within a year, the situation is going to get worse between the European alliances of NATO and America. So we've got to watch which side of it, of the street, or where it is we're sitting on. As Donald said he said to Ukraine, and he's saying to Europe, I'm not on your side. I'm not on anybody's side. I'm on America's side. And Europe at this point is not appreciating that.
There's a lot of historical context to all of this, because Europe has, as you said before, Europe's been fighting each other for centuries. I mean, UK is on France's side, and then they're against them, and then they're against Russia, and then they're on Russia's side, and it's just back and forth, and they're constantly at each other's throats, and this human game of chess is going on. Whereas if you go back to when they first formed the American Constitution, America was meant to be isolationist. They weren't meant to get involved in foreign wars, and it wasn't until World War I and World War II that they stepped outside of that through a lot of pressure coming from Europe. Do you want to give that historical context? And do you think it's playing out now more than it has in the past few decades? Yeah.
So even with the 13 states that rebelled, and I wrote that down in my book on What a Capital Idea. You know why? Well, there was a lot of Scottish money coming into the Scottish banks, into those colonies, and a lot of Scots in those 13 colonies that were anti-British, and they're still, English, and they're still anti-English in so many ways. But the French were wanting to do business with them. And the thing about if you set up a colony in America, they were private companies, and we don't appreciate that they had a letters patent as a private company, a joint stock company, to go and set up in Virginia or Philadelphia or Maine or wherever it happened to be. And so the private companies with private people that were actually running this. The thing about Australia, or New South Wales, was the first government paid for, sponsored colony that Britain had ever established. But getting back to the American situation, they wanted to do trade. Or the thing about setting up the colony was that you had to pay taxes, import duties on the goods going into England. But the Scots wanted to do business with the French because there wasn't any taxes. England said, no, you can't do that. And they kept doing it. So the British Navy went down and they sunk 100 ships. I mean, you've got to stop and think about that. 100 burning French and American ships, and said, we told you not to do it. And a few years later, they were back. So a lot of the people coming into the United States came in from Scandinavia as well, which is where you get a number of Minnesota and Idaho. The names of the states come from Scandinavians. Who were also religious-based and anti a lot of the authoritarian structures of Europe, as were the Scots, and many others were sick to death of the class society of Europe. And America, like Australia, became an egalitarian society. They were sick to death of the European wars. And so when it came to even the First World War, it took some years before America got involved. And with the Second World War, business people out of America were selling uniforms and tanks and whatever to the Germans as well as the Brits. So it took the war in where? It took the war in the Pacific, in Pearl Harbor, to drag America into not only war in the Pacific but also Europe. So yes, and then with their wealth, etc., and intelligence, they tried to pull Europe together because they had a new enemy called communism. So Russia has always been part of Europe until it became communist, and Russia wants to rejoin Europe. And Putin has said, our enemy is not amongst ourselves, the Europeans. Our new enemy is going to be with the Arabs in the Middle East, and let us join NATO. But the other NATO European countries have said, oh, no, you can't do that, then we won't have an enemy. So you can see how stupid the logic is when Russia has been part of Europe. You know, think about the music and Tchaikovsky and all the literature, etc., the swapping of kings and queens and whatever, you know, in this sort of thing. And so it becomes part of that European. It's just a phase in Europe for Russia to be on the outer. So America never has wanted to be part of that old paradigm. And now, now with all the new opportunities and the new money and the new way of seeing the world, America has just taken off in such a different direction that Europe's not going to be able to catch up, because Europe has tied itself into an industrial model. Even its major car dealers, with its BMW or Volkswagen, have stayed with the old ways of doing things. And now I understand that Germany is in economic trouble, as is France. So the old models are not serving it in the new era. So that's why you've now got the Donald Trump shaking his head and saying, oh, who is that? Oh, the new leader of Germany. Oh, they've got their own problems, and laughs it off because they're not interested.
You know, it's interesting when he had Keir Starmer. This was before what happened with Zelensky. He had Keir Starmer to the White House, and he just made that little offhand comment, oh, can you take on Russia by yourself? It was almost as though he knew what was going to happen, that UK would continue to support Ukraine and they would continue the war effort. And Trump was going, okay, well, you can do that, but you're going to do it without me. And he's just come out today. I'll play this clip. He's come out and he's saying that he's going to pause military aid to the Ukraine.
Yeah, only pause. There's a good word.
Aid to Ukraine. Mr. Trump previously refused to confirm if he would temporarily stop aid to the nation, but he made it clear it's a fast-moving situation. The US president launched a fresh attack on Volodymyr Zelensky as well.
Well, I just think he should be more appreciative, because this country has stuck with them through thick and thin. We've given them much more than Europe, and Europe should have given more than us, because, as you know, that's right there. That's
yeah. So you were laughing. So you think it's just going to be a temporary pause? You don't think it will last?
Oh, I'm surprised he didn't do it within 20 minutes after the last interview. I thought, well, I mean, what else is going to happen? You know, there's no troops going in. I mean, when you insult someone who's the president of the new, free, and advancing world, and sort of say you're wrong and I'm right, and you know, all your money I'm going to use to get peace my way. I mean, Donald was insulted, and it was Zelensky, one of the few people I've never heard of another person being walked out of the White House before, but there he was. So I was surprised within 20 minutes, and I'm sure they did. Within 20 minutes, they said, well, that finishes his money, doesn't it? I mean, how much has he already got that he's been appropriated, passed through the Congress, but hasn't been spent yet? Stop it. But it's a nice way. Well, we better slow the whole thing down, Donald. Wait 48 hours. And then so we're going to pause the money going into this place. Pause it. It's just permanently paused, I think.
What do you think happened? Like, if you look into your crystal ball and you can see how all this is playing out, what happens? Does the war continue? Does Ukraine fight on its own, or does Zelensky fall on his sword and just concede that he's going to have to make a deal?
Yeah, there's two things. It's a good thing to say. I mean, what do you see with what's happening with Donald at the moment? America's more able to accept private investment. And so, as China has said, it's the private sector that's now leading China. Well, the private sector certainly leads America. It doesn't in Australia. It's the big pension funds. This whole business of superannuation, these companies are massive. And our country and our economy is not led by private enterprise coming in and making all the changes that we see in America. Europe is also very functionalist, regulated, etc. So it's the private sector. How, one would ask, are they going to be able to do anything in Europe? So it's just in the mud. It's not going anywhere. It can't advance. This is the European thinking. It's just stuck. It's moving towards recession, I think. So how then does Europe get an injection of private funds to move and advance its economies forward? Well, it's not open to do so. It's got so many regulations. So how is it going to move? The salvation, I think, for Britain, because it's only relating to Europe out of choice, not out of necessity, is in Nigel Farage. If you listen to Nigel talking, he's in the same room as Donald. In fact, he was standing in front of the stage when Donald was giving his speech after getting all the numbers to be president. And Nigel, by the way, has got a copy of my book. And he and I were talking about it months before, years, it would be, I don't know, not quite a year ago, when he had time to talk to me. But then Elon Musk has said, oh, you've got an election coming up. Would you like $1 million? I think it was actually more than that. Would you like $1 million? So you can see that because Nigel has spent time in America, his thinking is the same. Britain was the greatest empire in human history, run by private enterprise. And what's happened? Well, what happened is the 2 world wars brought it to its knees. And why hasn't it got back up again? Well, because it's brought in all the regulations, and it had this romance with the EU for a while that actually helped cripple it and took so much money again out of the coffers in England. And why isn't it progressing now? Well, if you've got a socialist leader that wants to spend welfare, or if you've got the Conservatives that are so busy fighting themselves that they don't know where to go because they can't read this week's polls, you can see why Britain's hope is to again find a leader in Nigel Farage. And I really think that he may actually get it. People in Britain may have the insight to see that they too could do with a leader to change their country.
But what does that mean then for Australia? Because we don't have a Donald Trump, we don't have a Nigel Farage, we don't have anyone that even resembles anything of solid leadership. Albanese is taking in the polls because overwhelmingly people feel that he's weak, and I don't think people have a lot of faith in Peter Dutton as well. And there's no one in the minor parties, it seems. What do we do?
See, what's the song that's being sung? It's the private enterprise that's going to move a country forward. How do you encourage entrepreneurs? How do you deregulate to make things happen? How do we stop the great flood, river of money that's leaving and companies that are leaving the country because you can't make a quid here? There's just too many regulations. And if we don't do something, we, like Europe, are going to be standing on the end of a recession. So what could Peter Dutton do? Well, what governments used to do, what Governor Macquarie did, was spend money on building up infrastructure so that private companies and prosperity could prosper. That's what government can do, not get involved in business, but make business possible. Bring down the taxes, and one can only hope if Donald does it, and they can see that the model works of bringing down taxes will actually let your economies take off, is the right way to go. Reducing our cost of energy, at least Peter Dutton can see that much, but I've got no idea who is going to have the
testicular fortitude.
There we go. Testimonial for it. There's another word for it.
I got a couple of comments. Ron says, Christopher, you are an excellent guest. So I agree with that one. But Dilemmas says, come on, Dr. Chris, hit me with something to look forward to because I'm not seeing it.
Oh, well, something to look forward to. Oh, I think it's getting up and seeing what Donald Trump is doing today. For me, it's like watching Netflix. This is, I think, what you are seeing is as significant as the first hammer blow that brought down the Berlin Wall.
Wow.
You are watching a change, a massive change in the world order of things. And I don't mean just the leaders. I'm talking about the technology and the things that are going to change our world. You have seen the first hammer blow to the wall in this meeting with Zelensky. And it is amazingly exciting to be part of, to be alive, to watch the world changing. And, you know, it's almost like pulling, as they do, the great rod on the train tracks as they used to. So the train was about to go in a different direction, or pressing a button and changing the channel. The rocket is taking off and you're watching it. Now, we're only the observers. So I feel that when people want to jump in, who really do not have a stake in or the knowledge of what happens in America, what are they? The peanut gallery, I think we call them. And we are only in the stalls watching what's happening. And I'm at least able to give some information to say, watch how the regulations are coming down. Watch how there's an increase in resources and energy coming into America. Watch all the investments that are happening. Now, everybody else is tied into the status quo. Australia definitely is. So how are the major events that are happening in the rest of the world going to affect Australia? Well, if and when Donald turns his attention to Southeast Asia, that's when he's going to put down some very hard lines with us as well. We too need to be spending more than whatever we are, less than 2% on our GDP for defence. We too need to be opening up for big foreign investments to come in. You know, someone reminded me, Queensland is bigger than Europe.
Wow.
We have not even started to develop this country.
Yeah. It's funny. We had Malcolm Roberts on Sunday night, and he said that Queensland should be the richest place in the world, yet they've got homeless people all over Brisbane and other parts of the state.
Yeah, he said. Malcolm said to me. Malcolm said to me, "Oh, you know, come up and see me." You know, and then I got to the office. You know, talk about my book, and he said, "I've got 10 minutes. Sit down there and we'll have a chat." Well, 1.5 hours later, he was still talking to me, and I was driving. I did what I shouldn't do. The phone was ringing, and I had it on my lap, and I pressed the button, and I said, "You know, hello." And he said, oh, Chris, it's Malcolm. And I said, Malcolm who? I'm busy driving, I've got to hang up. Malcolm Roberts. Oh, Malcolm, I'll pull over, you know. Malcolm who? So Malcolm and I have had a number of conversations. And yes, I have a lot of time for him. And if there's a politician that can logically catch hold of, he and Jared Rennick are two of them in Queensland. And what he's saying is what I've said before. Queensland could be so great, and we have an opportunity under a Conservative government just to open it up for business. We could just take off. But who's behind the Conservative Party, and how are the polls reading this week? And, you know, should we really do something? And could we really change education and put Australian history on the curriculum and get all the woke stuff out? So I don't hear the enthusiasm that Malcolm's got in really making this place take off, but it could.
Yeah, it definitely could. Now, you mentioned the status quo, but you also brought up that this could be a moment similar to the bringing down of the Berlin Wall. Yeah. Will the establishment let that happen? Like, what can they do to stop Trump? I mean, he's already been shot at once. I mean, and there was another attempt as well. Do you think anything will happen?
They've had a good go at trying, but he's well and truly in the driver's seat now, and the Democrats have been relegated to, I don't know if they've even got a seat in the kitchen. at the moment, but they're certainly not sitting down at dinner, in the main room at all. They've just been delegated to the scrap heap because he's just taken off in terms of what he's doing. Repeat the point again. You're saying what?
So I'm asking about the establishment, the old world order.
Oh, the establishment. Yeah, well, those in control will always struggle to maintain control. And we have a problem there. So how do we move forward? Donald is saying and so is President Xi of China. It's the private sector that will move us forward. It's the entrepreneurs. Does a politician ever have a good idea? What does a politician do when there's a problem? I'll take the Chinese coming down the coast. Here's a problem. What are we going to do? Oh, we do what we naturally always do. We form a committee. Now, I don't know whether a committee is ever going to move us forward and bring the progress.
It was worse than that. It was worse than forming a committee. Albanese got up on TV and he started defending the Chinese and started making excuses for them. Oh, they did give us notice and blah, blah, blah.
Oh, well, maybe they'll be on the committee, mate. Give them a seat, make it equal. Everybody's got to be there. We've got to have all the genders and all the political persuasions. Get the Chinese involved. I mean, you can see that what I'm saying is, when did a politician have a good idea? I mean, I'm sure there is one, but it's a good thing to throw out there just as a good comeback, A good idea in terms of how to progress this country. I mean, here's a good idea. We need to do something about our lack of water in the central parts of this nation. The idea is we need to get water from the places where it is in rivers to the places it isn't. Oh, there's a mountain involved. Oh, a mountain. Oh, there's two mountains. Oh, gee, I don't know. A couple of mountains. I don't know. We can go to the moon, but we can't get water to the central areas of Australia. And who's going to own it anyway? Oh, we'll have to shell shares in the water, mate. It won't be just the government. People won't just have access to the water. So you can hear the mess that we can't even get over our major geographical problem of the lack of water to move ourselves forward. And Dutton moving forward Peter Dutton moving forward on the nuclear. There's a good idea. I have to say, there's a good idea.
Okay, well, let's finish up with Zelensky, because I can't help, but play this clip, because I think it's something that I've been questioning for a long time. Why does Zelensky never wear a suit? And they almost use it as an opportunity to just paint him as like this, bizarre character. Trump made light of it when he arrived, and also this question from the media came through where they were ridiculing him, it seemed.
Why don't you wear a suit?
See, he's got, as I said, I've been fascinated.
Why don't you wear a suit? You're the highest level in this country's office, and you refuse to wear a suit. Just want to see if you do own a suit?
Yeah, you have problems.
A lot of Americans have problems with you not respecting.
I don't have such. I will wear a costume after this war will finish.
Okay.
Yes, maybe
something
like yours. Yes, maybe something better. I don't know. We will see. Maybe something cheaper.
So you can tell that Zelensky really didn't appreciate being asked that question.
Yeah. But you see, when it all started, this guy he's got a degree in something. I've got to give him that. But he gave away what his specialty was and became a comedian on stage. Now, the Ukraine went through a revolution. And I had a friend who went over there to teach English, and he got caught up in it. And he said, there's fighting, I'm getting emails, and he's on the phone, and Stan's saying, there's fighting in the streets. I'm having to run. I found a monastery to hide in. Well, he was hiding in the monastery for years, teaching English to the monks, with Stan. Now, that was before. There was a short period, and then there was another revolution, and that's when Zelensky got elected, if he got elected, to be the leader of the Ukraine. So there's that history of turmoil there. But somebody got to him straight away. But he's now got 3 PR companies, American. One is something like Curve. There's an Andrew fellow, and I think the other one's a Yorktown, I think. But there's 3 PR companies that are moving him around. And so they said, you've got to look like you're one of the troops. You're out there on the front line. You've got to be crawling out of the trenches. It was like the movie Wag the Dog, if you've ever seen that, where they're trying to dress up the president and get him out of the trouble with the girl guy that he had. And then, they're making the whole war scene of the woman and the cat. And so here it was with Zelensky. Put on the army T-shirt. Wherever you go, you've got to be the military figure and raise all that money because your country is in trouble. So now you see that's just his image, like Donald and the tie. But for the Americans, and certainly for the British, he would not get into Buckingham Palace, being so unsophisticatedly dressed as he did. But it was a great insult to America for him not to even dress appropriately. And that just set them off before he even sat down. But it's a PR.
Do you think the Americans view the White House on the same level as Buckingham Palace?
Oh, definitely. I mean, if you hear Vance, he said, "You're in the Oval Office, you watch your language." So they do. You see them salute the flag and sing their patriotic song, their national anthem, and the honor guards, etc. So yes, they may have walked away from Britain, but they took the political system and the judicial system with them. And with that also came the military system, the same sort of ranks. And so the relationship in so many ways, of course, has continued. So they also carry the same respect for their leader. So when they walk in to see the president who's invited them into this room, he is expected to treat Mr. President as Mr. President, which he has not done right off the bat.
Okay, so we probably should finish up, but maybe just give an overview of everything that we've covered today. What's your overall analysis, and where do we go from here?
If Americans were watching that interview, and again struggling to understand what the argument is, again the body language, the insult of how he looked, Trump's approval ratings just went through the roof. Here he was defending America. So that's the first thing. In his own backyard, he has just won so much support for being for America and not for them. The other thing is sit back and just watch how the people that are in a commanding position change the world that you and I know in the next 12 months. And just watch the speed of how things take place as they do in the ICT world. Everything is instant, and they are happening instantly. And there's no committees. There's nobody sitting down and saying, well, let's get everybody involved, and do we have the right number of men and women, etc. in this room? They're just making decisions. And they're already leaving in terms of where they're going. And this is, as it were, a whole new paradigm of how the world is going to function. And we're seeing the friction. We're seeing the friction in Europe, and then we're seeing it certainly being expressed in the Ukraine. So it's a fascinating time to be alive, to watch the world change at this point.
And who do you think will win out in the end? Do you think Trump is, will he make a mistake? Is he infallible?
Oh, well, I think he's got such a good team around him. And as you watch, he is so open. The other thing people don't pick up, I haven't heard anybody pick up, is if you watch the Zelensky-Trump interview, look at how much listening Donald does. He's sitting there with his hands together, and he's actually listening to what's being said. Before he exploded with this business about, you're going to lead us into World War III. And when Vance interrupted him to talk, again, he just doesn't say, where's your manners or something. He listens. And I think if a lot of the stuff that's coming onto his table is not just his opinion, And so he is going to take his team with him. And with all this openness, this transparency, where the cameras are in the Oval Office, where he's standing there with Elon Musk and Elon's child, I couldn't believe it. And they're just discussing where they're going. We've never seen such transparency, but they're not afraid of the truth of where it's going. So let's see, I'll be very surprised if Donald makes a mistake. It's the whole group of them that make the mistake. And I believe they have the capacity to say sorry and to fix it.
Yeah, definitely. All right. So you've written two books. So I want to let everyone know about. The first one is this Global Logic book that goes back to 2002. You were talking about a lot of this stuff. This one focused on Southeast Asia. What can you say about this book?
Yes and no. Now, that's out of print. It was printed by the biggest publishing company in the world and was really quite successful. It starts off with an analysis of Southeast Asia, but again, I use it to look at the financial situation, and then I talk about the sorts of things we've been going on about, how the world and business is changing. If somehow people can contact me, I can email them a PDF, call it $25. And you can have the book, or even $20. You send me $20, I'll send you the PDF, and you can have it on a form that you can read it. But it's a good read in terms of the analysis. The other book, of course, is only came out last year. What a Capital Idea, Australia 1770 to 1901, and it's available. You can get it through the website, which is reynoldlearning.com. And if you go to the history page in the book, there, and you press buy the book. If you can remember, there's a voucher code opportunity there. It says, do you have a voucher? If you put in 1770, the price will drop from $109 to $80. So I think that's what, 20-something dollars discount, $29 discount, if you remember to put in the code 1770. And you've only got to type into the internet, what a capital idea, and up will come the book. But it's selling incredibly well. There's 1,600 copies have been sold in less than 12 months with this book. And I'm told that a copy has now arrived at Buckingham Palace. So I'm very pleased about that.
That's amazing. Look, I've got my copy here. I highly recommend it. I actually bought 2 more as gifts. So I encourage everyone to do that as well. Don't just get one for yourself. Also get one to share with your friends and your family, because I think it's that book there is incredibly important in my opinion. And I encourage everyone to go back and watch the previous interview that I did with Dr. Reynolds about the history of Australia prior to 1901, because that was an incredibly important story that a lot of us are not hearing, and we haven't heard that for a long time. So that's another huge issue. So please, as he said, head to reynoldlearning.com and you'll find the book there, and follow the prompts, and also remember that code as well, 1770. But look, Doctor,
if you contact me about Global Logic, we'll figure out how to get you a copy.
Awesome, bro. All right,
you can get my phone number, contact details off the website.
Yeah, all that's up on Dr. Reynolds' website. And look, mate, I thank you for coming on today and talking about this. It's a fascinating, it was a fascinating event to see that all play out, but it's also been fascinating to get your take and your insights as well. And I'm still planning to get you back on the show in the future to talk about the Australian Constitution, because I think you've got a lot of insights there as well. So I'm looking forward to that one. But for the audience, please stay up to date with everything that we're doing by heading to commandingthenarrative.com. As I said in the beginning, all our podcasts are up there. Any articles, newsletters, and also upcoming events. You'll find it all at commandthenarrative.com. Hit the sign up button in the top right hand corner and you'll get a weekly newsletter from me with all of that. But for now, thank you very much, and we'll see you all next time.